Today we have another episode from our Cos-Moss series. In the first episode, we looked at street moss under the microscope, which is typically found in the cracks and joints of roads and sidewalks. If you missed the first episode and are interested in what we discovered in the street moss, you can find a link to the first episode in the video description. In this Cos-Moss series, we want to find out how and if mosses and their tiny inhabitants differ depending on where they grow. In today's episode, we see a few familiar faces again. Hint: some of them are really long and others are rather chubby. So I took my dog and we went for a small hike in the forest. In the process, I collected our today's object of desire, the forest moss. Then I soaked the moss in water, so we will be able to examine the aquatic microorganisms. But first, let's look at the moss plants under the microscope. I have collected two different species. Here you can see the species Brachythecium rutabulum. This moss is very common in forests, but you can find this species even in inner cities. Typical are the ovate leaves, where the leaf edges are finely serrated. This species is easily confused with the species Brachythecium rivulare, but under the microscope you can clearly see the missing, colorless and large cells that could be seen in Brachythecium rivulare at the base of the leaf. Here you can see the leaf cells, which are filled with lots of chloroplasts. This layer is also called the lamina. It often consists of only one cell layer, which lacks the cuticle. This allows the plant to absorb water and nutrients directly through the leaves. But without the protective cuticle, the moss plant is much more prone to drying out quickly. The other species of moss I have collected is called polytrichum commune. This moss can also be found nearly everywhere. The leaves are elongated, serrated and lanceolate in shape. The name polytrichum is derived from ancient Greek and means many hairs. Therefore, the moss is also known as common haircap or great golden maidenhair. Since the moss is very tough and durable, it was used in the Middle Ages to weave so-called moss braids, which could then be used as ropes, for example. The green cells also contain chloroplasts, which are essential for the process of photosynthesis. The more whitish cells lack this important green pigment, which can be seen here. But for now, let's take a look at the little critters I was able to find in our soaked forest mosses. This lively guy here is probably a bit camera shy, as he keeps trying to hide from us behind this piece of plant material. This microorganism belongs to the genus of Ciliates. More precisely, its scientific name is colpoda cucullus. Its shape reminds me of a kidney, and it looks a bit like someone once chewed a piece out of it, but I can reassure you, all colpoda look like that. It's their typical shape, so everything is fine. These protozoa feed on bacteria, which are swirled to their cell mouth through a kind of funnel equipped with many cilia. Colpoda are found all over the world, but especially where they find a lot of food, so preferably in environments with high concentrations of bacteria. And what crawling creature can we see here? A type of mite, of course. There are several species of mites found in mosses, and the most common are probably the oribitid mites. They are therefore often called moss mites. Since mites belong to the arachnids, they have 8 unmissable legs. In the larval stage, however, most mite species have only 6 legs. So our mite here is definitely an adult one. You can see how small this critter is by the tiny grain of sand right next to it. Not everyone likes hairy legs, but in the world of mites they play an important role. Most mites are blind, and all those hairs and bristles on their legs and bodies are there so that they can sense their environment. Of course, I also found a lot of nematodes again. These little worms are indeed everywhere. It is estimated that there are more than 25,000 different species of nematodes. They can be found on the bottom of the sea, in the tropics, in the mountains. They have even been found in the polar regions. To further illustrate the sheer mass of nematodes on our planet, there are approximately 57 billion nematodes for every single human being. So, if you're creeped out by them, this is probably bad news for you. But there are many other tiny creatures hiding in our forest moss, like this dancing little protozoan here, which looks a bit like a strangely shaped potato. Or this larva of a beetle or a mosquito, which is visibly annoyed by the fact that all this plant material is attached to it and it can't get rid of it. To make matters worse, it also gets bugged by a very cheeky colpoda. Poor larva, it seems to have a rough day. And who is hiding behind this piece of plant? It's a rotifer. You can find them here just as often as in the street moss. I named this little body Flash because it moves really damn fast. Maybe it has an important appointment and overslept, who knows? On its foot it has 2 toes with adhesive glands that it uses to move around, as seen here, or to stick to a surface. Rotifers can also move in other ways. They can glide, swim, or even move with the help of their cilia on their heads. Here we can observe a rotifer while feeding. With its wheel-like ring of cilia, it creates a vortex that swirls tiny food particles toward its mouth. And now I have a question for you. Which microorganism should not be missing when it comes to moss? Obviously, the tardigrade. No matter how many years you've been looking through a microscope, observing tardigrades probably never gets boring. This one is particularly small and therefore a fairly young tardigrade. These chubby little bears hatch from eggs and get bigger as they get older. To grow, tardigrades must molt, grow a larger skin and shed the old one. Depending on the species, tardigrades do this 4 to 12 times in their lifetime. For comparison, this is an older tardigrade. It is much larger, more pigmented, and therefore has had to shed its skin a few times in the past. These adorable stubby legs are their signature feature, you could say. On these stubby legs are claws that allow them to better cling to a surface or a substrate. But seriously, their clumsy appearance makes them irresistibly cute, and you could watch them for hours, couldn't you? I hope you enjoyed this microscopic adventure into the hidden world of forest moss, even though we have already seen many microorganisms such as rotifers, tardigrades, and nematodes in the previous street moss episode. For me personally, these little critters never get boring, no matter how often I observe them. And if you feel the same way, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. If you also want to follow me there, the links are in the description below the video. Thank you and hopefully see you next time.